Okay, welcome everybody. It is Wednesday, the 17th of November. It's 5 p.m. And that means it's showtime for the Swiss Jam Singapore webinars today about how to implement people and skills development strategies. And this is part of a series around the People and Skills Development Awards organized by Swiss Jam. And this is already the third episode this year, webinar number 3. We have fantastic guests and panelists today, and I'm very excited about the still climbing number of participants that are still joining us today. A quick reminder for everybody joining in, this is really about you out there on the other side of the screen and camera. So it's about your questions that our panelists want to address. So please, very, very early on, put them into the Q&A function, in Zoom and not just the chat, right? Because then you can also decide if you find somebody else's questions extraordinary important and you want to upvote them. So even if you don't have a question yourself, you can put it in and it will be upvoted and we'll go by that, yeah? So my name is Lars Födisch. I'm a former journalist and professional storyteller, and we have an absolutely starstruck panel today. We have David Hendrick Jr., Director, CHI People Development at Tock Seng Hospital. David, how are you doing today?
Very good, very good. I'm looking forward to this exchange and sharing with everyone. Lars?
Yeah. And I think we in the warm-up, I learned it's like 10,000 people at Tock Seng roughly that you work with.
Yeah, only 10,000. That's right.
Only 10,000. Yeah. Okay. Later we check how many names you remember.
Okay.
Then we have Dr. Phua Chi Tek. He's the Director, National Center of Excellence for Workplace Learning. Chi Tek, how are you doing today?
I'm very good. Thank you very much, Lars. I think the National Center of Excellence for Workplace Learning is around. It's a setup by SSG and Nanyang Poly, and we are here to help the SMEs. So I don't have 10,000 people, but we talk to a lot of SMEs.
Excellent, fantastic. And last but not least, on the panel today, we also have Lin Hong, the Director, Human Resources and Office Services from a company everybody knows. Everybody feels a little bit guilty when they talk, when they go there, but everybody wants it. Everybody will feel hungry when I say she's from McDonald's. Hi, Lin.
Hey, Lars, and thanks for the intro, and hi, everyone. Yes, I'm from the happy place. You see the golden arches, definitely put a smile on your face. So looking forward to today's session, and let's have a good one.
Okay, thank you. But of course, today's panel is part of the overall People and Skills Development Awards and webinar series. This is now for the 5th time it's running as part of the Swiss Business Awards that started in 2017. And I think last year, this year, a very, very special year with a pandemic that forced everybody to rethink what they do, how they do it, where they do it. And I think that will be a big kind of thread through today's webinar. Talking about the awards, and then I'm passing over to the co-host and basically initiator of this webinar. Just on the awards will be announced, the winners will be announced on the 9th of December. And that brings me over to Fabienne Enderlin from Swiss Jam, the Vice Chairman of Swiss Jam and Chief People Officer at Zülke Asia. Fabienne, bonsoir.
Wow, bonsoir. Good afternoon, everyone, dear panelists and all participants. A warm welcome from myself and the Swiss Chamber. Thanks for being part today. I'm very excited and grateful, actually, that we can host this 3rd part, as Lars has already mentioned. I do a quick review just to give those an idea what we've been doing so far and why. As you mentioned, it's the 5th year to having that award. And I believe over the last 5 years, it has even become more important to talk about it, to showcase what companies are actually doing So this is what the award is, to invite companies to think about what they have been doing, think about what they could do better, and learn from others. So you can see here a few details about the award. I'm not going into detail because the deadline is over. We are very glad that we have received 14 applications this year, which is quite a good number again, considering the difficult times we are in. We are having a jury meeting this week with a very prestigious number of people and experience and expertise. And as Lars mentioned, the announcement of the winner will be on the 9th of December, when there's also the final for the Digital Transformation Award. I believe we have a slide with some pictures from the last year's winners. Yes, here we go. We can see the history. Obviously, in the past, we were able to have a black tie gala where we could celebrate the winner. Hopefully in the future we have that too, but it doesn't change anything or the importance of the award, because it's really about showcasing what companies can do and learning from each other. And based on that, we have done or we have implemented this series of webinars with asking the question, and actually, or I hope we answered the question, why is it important to invest in people skills and development? Then what can be done? And today we are going to talk about how it can be done. I would like to use the opportunity to thank in that as well our partner Skills Future, who has been part of the journey since several years now. Obviously a very important partner, as we will also hear more from GTIC, but there are many government agencies who are here for the companies in Singapore to support all their efforts in regards of people and skills development. So a big thank you to the Skills Future Partnership. We're grateful, looking forward to continue. And now I'm looking forward to a very special group today. And it is really, as Lars said, about you, that you can learn from those who have so much experience and are here to share their expertise.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fabienne. So let's directly dive into the conversation, right? So the overarching topic is how to implement people and skills development strategies. I think in what I call peace times, that would have been already quite a challenge, but these times are everything but normal. So I think everything that we wanted to do in the last 24 months was just either accelerated, put on hold, completely put upside down, and then put through a blender, frozen, defrosted, and that's where we are today. I think that's the emotional journey we all went through at some point or the other. So maybe let's start with David. So you are the Director HR at Tock Seng, obviously responsible for people development, but you're also looking after you're director at the Center for Healthcare Innovation, right? So, and healthcare is a big service organization. So you organize, you upgrade the product and the people that deliver it. Is that the correct kind of way to look at it?
We are in the business of health and healthcare. We want to focus on health, but we need to take care of healthcare as well. Okay, yeah. And I know before Tock Seng, you worked with some of the largest MNCs, including BASF, Fraser, Centerpoint, Conrad Hotels. So a good mix of product and services. So given your current role in HR and people development, what have been the biggest challenges in those past 2 COVID years for you? Oh, wow. Let me see how to answer this question, Fabienne. Remember? This is a private joke in case you all want to know. Okay, let me share with you that the last 2 years is actually an amazing journey, right? And like what Lars says, right? This topic is about implementing people development and strategies. If you're familiar with the hospital, let me give you a little bit of context. We are a hospital that is 177 years old. We are at the epicenter of COVID. We are looking after COVID patients for the last 21 months and still going strong. And the interesting about healthcare in Singapore is we are one of the fastest accelerated in terms of the elderly, the aged population. as well as on the other side of the spectrum is we are having a shrinking workforce. So we are actually, kind of a candle burning at both ends. And I think, the whole essence of people and development strategies is so crucial. So what we actually did was we had certain strategies in place of how we look at both competencies as well as capability building. Competencies, how we look at it is what the skills that we need to deliver for the jobs that we do today. Whereas capability is the skills that we need to maneuver in any kind of environment. And I think that has been put to the test during COVID. And when COVID came, we needed to be nimble and we needed to be moving very fast. So one of the ideas that we had in 2019, just before COVID came, in June 2019, was we realized that the workforce was changing. And when we talk about our 10,000 workforce, we have a 5-generation workforce from 18 years old all the way up to 80 years old. And working in a hospital, we are interdisciplinary as well. So we have medical staff, we have nursing, we have allied health services, we have administration, and we have support staff as well. So when you look at the whole dynamics of people development, it's actually highly complex because we have the professionals and we have those supporting staff that also needs to be developed, right? So when we looked at June 2019, we realized that because people's attention spans were shrinking, we decided to focus on micro learning, bite-sized learning that will be able to bring learning to the workplace immediately so that people can learn it anytime, anywhere, and learn it when they need it. So at that time, when we actually implemented this in September 2019, a lot of people in the organization says, oh, do we need this? We attend training, face-to-face training. And it was kind of a struggle for us to get this momentum of micro learning into place. And when we launched it, I remember our COO mentioned the other time, you want to launch this at only 30 modules, right? 30. And we said that's a start, and for us was a good way of changing learning andragogies. And when COVID hit in February, a lot of people came knocking at our door to learn how to develop content because, in healthcare, the amount of information that had to change and we had to make this information readily available. And because we had the system in place to build these micro-learning modules, today, just about a year plus into micro-learning, we have close to 350 modules, right? So that has actually exponentially grown. It had allowed people to learn content immediately when it's needed. It was nimble enough to move content fast and be able to reach out to the masses, and reaching out to 20,000 people in bite-sized learning was very, very crucial. And now micro-learning has a space within TTSH, and it's going according to all the other modalities of learning as well, right? So that's just one good example I can give you of how we actually survived through COVID and are surviving through COVID now as well. Last.
Okay, then maybe a very practical follow-up question on that. When you want people to go through a development journey and upgrade skills, it needs time, and it needs the right mindset, and it needs the right attitude on the people that you address. We know that because of COVID, especially in hospitals, people have been probably more busy than ever before. It's life and death decisions that they have to take care of. How do you find time and balance, deliver patient care right now, deliver better patient care tomorrow?
Okay, that's a very, very good question. It is a challenge to actually maneuver change in a workforce that's 10,000. But actually, it's made simpler if there's a culture of learning in the organization, right? And honestly, a lot of times when I look at my job, I can see it as both difficult as well as extremely easy. So let me explain to you the two spectrums. Why is it difficult? It's because everybody wants to learn, and everybody's eager to learn, right? And why is it easy is because people are interested to learn and they want and allow us to push things that will reach out to them. So I remember, when COVID hit in February, and everybody was hands on deck. Even my team, a good portion of my team had to go and support the operations because things were moving so fast. Every day the numbers kept increasing, and the clinical staff needed to focus on the patients, and the support staff needed to do whatever was necessary to allow the clinical staff to focus on what they need to do. So, and that was in February when we started. And just 2 months after, going through COVID and, adjusting to the phases, our financial year actually starts in April. And by May, the workforce started to ask us, how are we going to continue learning? And that was amazing when we heard that, because, the eagerness of people to be able to respond to the adversities of taking care of patients, but maybe they found respite in having that mindfulness that, keeping me, in tune with what I need to have to go through this was actually very, very important, right? So I remember my team had to hunker down and look for learning platforms, right? To be able to push out learning content that made it self-directed, personalized. And within 2 weeks, we had to evaluate close to 5 different learning platforms, get management's approval. And we actually went with LinkedIn Learning because it's one of the professional platforms that actually enable a lot of valuable content, thought leader content, to be pushed out. And within 6 weeks, we made a decision, we pushed out, and we pushed that out to close to 3,000 learners, who got licenses and actually started their learning. So there was a challenge, but we were also lucky because there was a demand for learning, because people needed to go through mindfulness training, going through certain, managing resilience. And we came up with learning paths that, helped supported them in those areas as well.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sure, like with every new disease, by default, you learn how to even treat it. So learning and upgrading is just a necessity as you find out more, right?
Exactly.
Let's maybe move over to the next panelist. Chitek, you have over 20 years of experience at Nanyang Poly, and I found it's interesting. Your background is actually engineering, right?
Yep.
Satellite engineer. That's what I read somewhere. Now you have a doctorate in philosophy. That's an interesting spectrum.
Yeah. Okay.
So at the National Center of Excellence for Workplace Learning, you're dealing, in your intro, you said that briefly, a lot with SMEs, right?
Yep.
That don't have necessarily the systems or the budgets, nor the processes or expertise than Tock Seng might have.
Yep.
Maybe throughout your career, the challenges you've seen, are they the same during these past 2 years, just accelerated and stronger, or has the challenges that SMEs in learning face completely changed?
Okay, maybe I just have to talk about the first thing about satellite, because that was my first life. I built satellites when I was very young, in the UK, and I was in the Russians, and we converted ICBMs, missiles, into rocket launchers for satellites, and that was where we did it at Moscow, Kazakhstan, in Russian. But then subsequently, I decided that that's a lot of fun. I go on and do more engineering. I went to join MNCs, American MNCs, and we work on a lot of things on 3G, 4G. Then back then, 2G was the thing, and 3G was actually the up and coming. Subsequently, I joined NYP, Nanyang Poly, and as a lecturer and engineer, we work with a lot of SMEs, helping them to, because Nanyang Poly actually has an EDP background, and we came from the JSTI, Japan Technologies Institutes, German Singapore Institutes, French Singapore Institutes combined together. And because of this background, we are very industry focused, and we work with a lot of SMEs. And fundamentally, that builds up my connections and knowledge of how the SME works together. You're right, exactly, Lars. SMEs don't have a huge HR system. They're very, very lean. If you can find a person who's doing HR full-time, that is a very big SME. So that is where I can tell you, most of our SMEs are very lean. They share resources. And as I go on and take up the role as the National Center of Excellence for Workplace Learning, in terms of leading it, I discovered that actually is something very meaningful. Why is it so? It's because the SMEs are the ones who are really have a very limited resources, and yet they must send people for training because they need to move forward their competency so that they can be competitive in the market. But every time they send people for training, they have always this worry. What happens if this person resigns tomorrow? I will lose it. I'll lose the time, the effort, and the money. And then I have to start from scratch. And workplace learning become a very, very important cornerstone for them because we help to codify some of their knowledge, their tactic knowledge of operations into an asset, a document, which they can then use for development of their people. So many of the SMEs that came to us has two big problems. Number one, losing of talents. That was before COVID. Okay. Second, they cannot scale. So these are the big two issues they have. When COVID hits, a third thing came. What happened if my most important person, for example, the chef of a food production company, gets COVID and cannot come to work tomorrow? My production line will be down. My company will fall in a very short time. So that is where we can go in and quickly help a lot of SMEs put in place a workplace learning system that codifies some of their work into a document, the tactic knowledge, so that when anybody is not around, the next person can quickly come up to speed and bring the company forward. And that makes a lot of SMEs very, very delighted, very happy. And some even go on and embark on the digital transformation journey, as what David has mentioned just now. Digital transformation is important, digital learning is important, but how and where do you know where to digitalize in your workflow? That is where the tactic knowledge codify helps. So to sustain this, the SMEs work with NACE and with SSG, who is the funding agencies. Together, we help them move along and help them to develop a system that to date, more than 700 SMEs has experience in terms of getting a blueprint set up in their company to help onboard a new staff effectively and quickly, or to help to capture some important knowledge for the company to survive the long haul.
SMEs are defined, depending on what you look at, up to 100 or sometimes even up to $500 million revenue, right? So when you talk about SMEs, what kind of size in terms of manpower or revenue are we talking about? Because 500 million is very different from 500,000 a year.
Yes, in Singapore, the ESG actually define SMEs with two big things. First thing is the asset value, less than 300 million. Okay, and then the number of people, less than 200 people. So either one, once they cross it, or they will not be considered SME. So, but those SME I'm talking about are not that rich. I wouldn't call that the SME anymore. For those that NACE actually work with, I would say close to 90% are less than 100 people.
Okay, fair.
More than that
wouldn't qualify. That's for sure.
Yeah. So we qualify them as organization which is less than about 80 people, 100 people, less than 100 people. Okay, and then from there we help them to set up the system. Most of the time we see them as a challenge. The challenge they face is really about the lean management team they have and the lack of focus on developing the people.
A lot of SMEs that I worked with have the strength is a lot of times the weakness. A lot of times you have one owner that runs the business and is kind of the patriarch of the business. So, and that decides what is done at what pace and what priority. And a lot of times sales and revenue creation beats everything else. So
Yes.
how do those SMEs that you successfully worked with made sure that if the next order comes in, HR project and development is put on a back burner again and again and again, but is really implemented at the soul of the company?
Yes. So fundamentally, if you go to SME and tell them that you want to train the people, they will tell you that what is the ROI, what is my business goals, and how do these two match? So generally, we look at them and ask them a very fundamental questions. If you want to grow your business, where do you get the competencies to grow the business? How do you build on whatever you have today to employ 3 more person so that these 3 person can contribute effectively in the shortest time? And yet your company is not dependent on 1 person to just do the work. So all these conversations are very important. And when SME realized it, they started to say, oh, actually, I want to grow my business, but I didn't want to grow my people. Is it possible? Sometimes it's possible. They always have these visions. Yes, I want to grow my business, but I don't want to grow my people. But most of the time, after a while, they realize that they have hit enough roadblocks, and then there are enough resignations and people turnover, that they have come to a realization where to strike the balance. And that's where the enlightenment comes, and that's where we can help them. And that's where the conversation starts to converge.
Excellent. I also a friendly reminder to our audience to put your questions into the Q&A section. I see 2 are already in there that we'll address shortly. Let's move over to Lynn. And I realize I'm just so impolite. We do ladies last today. That's not how it's supposed to be. I'm so sorry. Lynn, you worked at McDonald Singapore for, I think, 15 odd years, and you're looking at human resources and office services. So the spectrum of people that you look after is quite wide, right? And you look after everything from planning, talent, change management, employee experience, to people development. How do you, with your experience and looking especially at the F&B sector, retain and implement new programs and initiatives? Because maybe you can give us a little bit of also insights what the staff turnover at different levels, because I'm sure at the large successful organization like McDonald's in Singapore, you have different speeds, different layers, and different needs to work with people. There's not just one workforce.
Yep. All right, so 2 questions. So the lady get the last question, but she has 2 questions at the go. All right. Okay, so the first question is how do we implement, right? And also sustain L&D programs for the F&B sector. So I think maybe I would just share 3 points on how to make this a sustainable effort moving forward. I think at McDonald's, right, we always put people at the focus on all that we do. People can be our customers, of course, and also our employees. So this is a little bit of a echoing what Chitek has just said. When we place emphasis on our people, and therefore whatever we do is going to be a people's first approach. And when we talk about people's first approach, then right, it has to therefore come from the top, and it is a culture. It's a culture that we all have to build in order to make that happen. And it has to, number one, come from the highest, most, or the top management. That's where the commitments comes in. And that's where sustainability comes in, right? After which, when that happens, the second step would also be putting resources behind that, right? So with a commitment, next would be resources. So when I talk about resources, right, it's about getting people to make that happen. Okay, and having the right, human capital to look into L&D, and also at the same time establishing a system, a L&D system that makes it happen. So when you systemized training, you put it as part of your people plan, right? That will therefore naturally happen and sustain the L&D programs that you've set out to do. So at McDonald's, we do have two types of training. We have systemized training and we have continuous learning training. So any and everyone that walks through the golden arches, regardless of your age, regardless of your race, religion, or whichever part of your career journey it may be, you will be undergoing a very detailed and purposeful systemized training. It can be our crew, it can be our crew leader, it can be our training managers, it can be our folks in our office, and they all have different systemized training. And this is a commitment that we have, and this is built into the system, and it wouldn't be only if I'm available, I go for the training. It's part of the system. It will be part of your orientation, and it will actually have, and we make that happen. So that's a systemized training. And then after that, we have continuous training. That's what's after my McDonald's lessons, right? So we have trainings. We have trainings that teach you how to run the station. We have training that teach you how to run a restaurant. We have training to teach our managers how to really operate a restaurant, right? So what's happened next? So then that's where the second umbrella comes in, and that's what we call the continuous learning, the soft skill, the leadership. That's where we try to build the leaders in our people and build the pipeline in our people. So that's essentially, in a nutshell, how we can introduce and sustain L&D or trainings in our organization. To your second question on turnover, obviously there are different types of folks in the F&B. You just have to look at the composition, right? So in F&B, we have casuals, we have part-timers, we have full-timers. I think our headcount is just as used to be, up to 12,000 headcount, but the COVID has kind of put a little bit of strain in terms of our staffing. We are now at 9,000 plus headcount in Singapore, spanning over more than 135 restaurants island-wide. So in terms of turnover, then you have to look at the crew composition and the dynamics. When we have about close to 55 to 60% as part-timers, they are usually transient, right? They're usually students on holiday jobs. They are usually mature workforce that continue to want to be active. So these are mostly part-timers that are transients. And generally for part-timers, transients workers or low-wage workers that are transient, they tend to have slightly higher turnover numbers. That's because of the demographics and the profile of this group of people, right? I turn over because I need to return back to school, for example. So the turnover for this group would generally be below there, about 40% to 45%, but COVID just actually unfortunately spikes it because of the reluctance to be a frontliner, right? So, at McDonald's, we are frontliners. However, we have our full-timers, we have our managers. So our managers, generally, it's about less than 20% of our turnover rate. So I think that's pretty healthy.
Fantastic. And the background of the question came from a comment I just saw here where somebody said, learning our stuff is a priority. However, it's tiring when we spend the time, money, and effort to develop the system and content, and then they leave. Reminds me of that joke or quote that some of you might know, right? HR walks to the management board and says, hey, these are the initiatives. We want to upgrade, upskill our staff. And the CFO asks back, what if we spend all the money and they leave? And the MD turns around, what if we don't upskill and they stay? So it's like a little bit to that part. And maybe last question on the McDonald's context, because we saw Tock Seng very singular in its setup. We saw the SMEs part, and I have the feeling like McDonald's Singapore is kind of both, because you're part of a global organization with a lot of experience, a lot of processes, structures, guidebooks, but at the same time you have to adapt them to the Singapore reality, to add the hmms, the las, and can and cannots. So how do you balance these kind of things in what's restricted, and how do you have to adjust it to local realities? Because I'm sure some of our participants are also part of large global organizations, but they have to make it work in their particular country.
Yeah, so you're right. most of the systemized courses and development program are, mainly from our global, and it does sets the tone, it does sets the framework. But the good thing is when such development programs are being introduced or being formulated, they consult markets, they consult market L&D leads, they consult the various markets, and we do put in, Singapore is lucky and fortunate to be one of those markets that we do play a very active role in influencing. I would use the word influencing and sharing our market. So and the delivery of the courses, how can we actually, to your point, right, since it's a global program, how can we kind of like customize it to make it like local? So we deliver our courses locally, right? So the folks that actually deliver are our local L&D managers, our local L&D leads, and they are able to articulate and give scenario. So at McDonald's, we're very, very big on scenario based learning, very, very big on experiential based learning. So yes, theory can be from global, but the execution of the lessons would already be, localized in that sense. So that actually helps to kind of smoothen out the whole process.
Thank you, Lynn. And I just saw we have somebody from KFC and Pizza Hut on the webinar, so I'm sure they are taking a lot of notes and comparing that on with their.
Yeah. Hi, Ishan.
Fabienne, you're Chief People Officer. You're not a panelist, but more from your perspective. After we heard these three perspectives, what do you think haven't we really addressed, and where would you want to drill a little bit deeper, put the finger where it hurts?
I would not do that, but I would like to hear from the others how they experienced over the past 18 months the impact on, let's say, the digitalization on trainings, because we all had to immediately go and work from home, which is already difficult, comes with all the challenges. And then it doesn't matter, I think, which industry, for all it was important to still do upscaling, to do still training on soft skills, on resilience, on self-management, as well as on technical skills. But we couldn't meet in person. So I believe all or most of us had to transform into using technology, either totally newly, or much more than before. So I think that might be an experience you could share from your perspective, how you experienced it and how you used it, which might be valuable for the audience as well. Because often people are afraid of technology, or they feel it's too expensive, or we don't have the experience, so we rather wait until it's, until we can just buy it or whatever.
Who want to take the question first?
Maybe I can share. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Yes.
In terms of technology and how do we get our folks on board, right? So for McDonald's, yes, we started the journey of transforming into digital, trying to have a hybrid kind of learning way early in 2018. We saw the need to modernize our learning environment because we knew that classroom learning, it's slowly going to be a little bit of taking a backseat, and more of virtual learning, because of the general population or our crew are quite digitally savvy to that certain extent. Everyone owns a phone, right? So what very early in 2018, we recommitted one of our pillars, which is the gift of learning, when we celebrated our 40th birthday in Singapore in 2019, is to recommit our commitment to grow and develop our people. And we do it by modernizing the way we teach our people, modernizing the way we're going to deliver the lessons. So we did a little bit of a hardware upgrade. We have 2 very dedicated training campuses within our office, and also we equipped every restaurant with the technology, whether is it a laptop, whether is it a tablet, in order to facilitate the hybrid and of course hybrid learning. And of course, COVID came and kind of like speed up the whole process. And the hardware side, as in HARDE, is easy fix. What's difficult is the hardware, HEART, or the mindset, and that's where we found it a little bit difficult because they wouldn't ready. They, meaning to say our people wouldn't ready. And like I can just share the demographics of our crew, which is, close to 80% of my workforce, right? We have from 14-year-old all the way to 86 to 88 years old. So it's a huge, huge group. And we do have, a bit of a pushback from folks that are a bit resistant to technology or virtual learning. Yeah, I see Chitik nodding his head. I think that's very true. And we do experience it. And how do we, and they were, let's be very candid, right? They would say, oh, Lynn, don't ask me to go and study. This is a very Singlish. I've enough. That's the reason why I didn't graduate. Or that's the reason why I didn't pass. Please don't ask me go. Don't send me for courses, etc. So this is what we actually experienced, and that was the biggest block that we have to navigate and to help our people. And how do we do that, right? We actually created an environment that make learning fun. We created an environment that is, let's study together, let's learn together. So one of the things that we did was to create an annual kind of, we call it the learning carnival. We call it as a carnival where everyone comes together, pre-COVID obviously, right? Comes together, and we work with SSG and I think SSG and Skills Future to bring about, and of course the CDCs, to bring about courses to our people, and peer influence, however age we are at, when peer influence peer, they kind of get over that. So and because the environment is so giving, the environment allows them to try, that actually encourages that learning cycle. Yeah, that's actually for McDonald's.
So it's like applying to that demographic. You need anything from VHS tapes to Minecraft simulations.
Oh yes. Yeah, that's very right. That's very true.
Is it similar for you, David? Because you were nodding heavily when Lynn said about the challenges of that wide demographic and making learning fun. Technology, is it the biggest problem? How do you get people into the mindset of learning?
Okay. No, I actually was nodding because I was falling asleep. Just kidding, Nas. Just kidding. Okay, so I kind of agree with what Lynn says, and I'm gonna just share a little bit, and then I think Chitek has something to say as well. I think when you have the lens of really these buzzwords of future-proofing workforce, building lifelong learners, and you truly as HR professionals, right, truly embrace and understand what these words really mean, and build strategies around that. Right. So for us in TDSH and most of the other organizations, because one of the questions asked was, it's easier for organizations that have structures and processes, right? But I've worked with in other industries that HR needs to play, have a position on the table that brings value, because a lot of times people see HR as a very operational unit. But I think if we can change our own mindsets first, and we are the ones that turn adversities into crises and make them into golden opportunities for ourselves, then we will be able to be loved ones when we come out of the crisis. And actually, that's what we are trying to do, because when we build a future-proof workforce, we are looking at building lifelong learners. And when we look at lifelong learners, we are trying to equip the learner with not one mode of learning, but a variety. It's like going to a buffet, right? When you go to a buffet, you don't eat everything on the buffet line, although most Singaporeans might do that. But generally, your stomach can't cope with it. So you pick and choose what you need. And I think in a HR or a L&D setup, you need to be able to give that diversity of learning that enables every learner to be able to pick whatever content they need. And I think in reality, when you talk about digital, right, we must realize that, there are research behind, the digital adoption curve, where there will be 16% or 20% that will say, hey, let's go for this new fad. I'm happy to take it with it, right? But then there will be that majority that you will need to nurture and build. But there will be 20% of the organization that will be what we call taking their time, waiting until they are forced to do it. But a lot of times what we do when we want to implement strategies, we focus on the 20% and say that these are your old workers, they don't want to learn and they don't want to adopt digital, right? But we forget about the 16 and the 80% or the 70% that will be your advocates. And I think the strategy that HR or learning people need to take is, how do we bend that adoption curve that today the research says that 16% are early adopters? How do we make it in our organizations, make it a reality that it becomes 25%? So that when we go back to the CFO and we tell them, hey, look, this is the investment that we bring back from learning, right? And hey, look, CFO, like what Lars says, right? Actually, we are not training for the organization, but we are training for the workforce of Singapore. Then that becomes a different business proposition altogether.
David, maybe with a short answer, a follow-up question that Esther Liang put in the TTSH context. How do you help your employees to sieve through all the content versus feeling overwhelmed by the many resources and programs, right? It's great to have 300 modules, but like, oh my God, where do I start? Maybe just how do you manage that? Do you have a curriculum, or that's what people liked, like a Netflix, or how do you make sure that it's easy to get started and not overwhelmed?
Okay, good question. Keep it short. So what we do is, number one, we create learning paths, right? So that it's very clear linked to certain kind of organization strategies that we have. Number two, we have curated groups that we actually push this learning to, right? And number three, I think most important is we allow for Netflix. We allow people to be able to search, because a lot of times we think what the people will need to learn. But actually the learner themselves need to be empowered to know what they want to learn. So it's a blend of all three, Lars.
Okay, fantastic. And then to Chitek, one question that came up was somebody praising the good government initiatives like what you're doing with NYP. However, it said most employers are reactive towards training. So it's one thing to offer to help them, but a lot of times it's the hardware versus hardware, what Lynn kind of was adhering to. How do you help SMEs, employers, to change their mindset?
Yeah, so this is the part where I was talking about it just now. So to help employers to change the mindset, there is a lot of challenges, because they are looking at money, they are looking at cost, and most of the time, when you want to help them, they will tell you that they are only interested in business growth. So the conversation cannot, or when what NACE has experienced and what we're trying to do is, we don't go in and talk about people development. We go in and talk about business growth. For business to grow, the hardware, which is the HEART, the hardware is very important, because you want to keep the people, you want to retain the talent, you want to build the competencies. And that is where the conversation will turn. Because when they hear the conversation, then the next thing you will ask is, will they leave me? I can almost hear them every time the next thing they will ask me. So will they leave me, like what you mentioned just now? So what happened is I don't train them and they continue to stay. If I train them and then they leave me. So the conversation always go back to the part where the Swiss and the German actually has a very nice system where they have a mentoring, coaching system set up for the apprenticeship model. And that's what NACE, led by MYP, is a very strong part, have a strong partnership with the Swiss and the German, and we adapt all these models for the Singapore needs. It's not just take the wholesale, but actually we look at it and say, okay, in Singapore, what works and what don't work? We are very critical, and we share with the employers what really works. And that's how we contextualize the context. And finally, that's a very important conversation that we always have. Beyond business growth is business transformation. Many employers, many SMEs actually are looking at themselves and says, yeah, I hear you, but I need to fight the fire today. I need to pay my rent. I need to pay my bills. I need to pay the salary. So what's the most important thing I can do to keep my people? Okay. And usually the conversation always goes on to talk about building competencies and growing the company to retain the talent.
Talking about talent, maybe just with a quick answer from you and then opening it up to the rest of the panel. One question was about Singapore context and what's the panel's view on training for an aging workforce that might be experienced versus skilled foreign talents that might be qualified and cheaper and can directly come and start? Is it an SME problem or not so much with the ones you work?
Okay, I mean, it's always an SME problem when talk about foreign workers. I mean, you have heard enough. I guess that's no need to repeat, but generally SMEs are very cost sensitive and they'll go for the most effective way to achieve the business goals. So COVID-19 actually is a very good test on how resilient they are, because the moment the foreign talents supply is being limited, they started to look at themselves and say, do I reduce my business or do I look for alternatives? That's when the more senior staff that has experience come into the picture. The question then is, how do we convert these people back to what they should do? So it's really about job redesign. So many of times when people go into this mode, it is not about, hey, can I get the people who are older to do what the younger people do? Is the job role able to transform by itself using digital means to let the aging people do a more impactful work while the young people can do the heavy lifting? So this is where we work with the companies, and job redesign is a very big topic that needs work with companies. And one of our partner like Novotel did job redesign, not just for the sake of designing, but around the user experience for the customers. And the staff themselves come in to suggest what can they do based on their age group. And from there, it is employer-employee trust building, and together they forge a job transformation for the organization. Okay, yep. Thank you. Maybe just with the last question to wrap things up, and we touched on it a little bit. Can training and development stop the wave of the Great Resignation? Is there a direct correlation, or not? Lynn, sorry to call you out, because you were saying COVID had an effect, especially on your frontliners. Does it work? Is there a direct correlation? Upgrading, skilling, investing in your staff and preventing them to leave? Because that's the business conversation that Chitek was adhering to.
Yeah, and that was also to link back to one of the questions, what if I train my folks and my folks leave me? I think that somehow there's a little bit of correlation. So let me just approach in that manner. So yeah, that would be I wouldn't be surprised, as that would be if I train and once leave me, I've wasted my company resources, I've wasted my company's time, and this trained person has gone to another organization with the upskill that he has gotten from me. Right. So that's basically the point. And I do see that in that lens, but I would like to also tweak it a little, in McDonald's lens, what do we see in L&D that is actually working well for us? And I urge, SMEs to also look at it in this lens. Now, I shared earlier that McDonald's, we are very big on people, and learning and development has always been one of our strongest pillar in retaining talents. We are very transparent in terms of developing our people. I shared everyone that walked through the Golden Arches will have the opportunity to be trained. We call it the archway to opportunities, and we even shared with everyone the pathways to management. It's in the training room, it's in the orientation booklet. What are the opportunities are there for them at every level or every stage of their career journey with us? And that is very transparent. And of course, they will have to go through the different trainings to get themselves ready for the next level. And if they see themselves growing, they see themselves adding value, not just for themselves, but even adding value to the organizations in the long run, right? Playing their little role in helping the organization, they feel that their contributions are valued. They feel that, hey, I'm part of this organization. I want to stay. And it motivates them because the level that they can actually grow into, it's already communicated. It's on the wall of our office. And at McDonald's, we have also shown that, even a crew can be a manager. Even a manager can be a director. So our director of operations started out as a crew.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah. So that is basically on the part on making our people feel that we are investing in you because we are sincere in upskilling you so that you can get better at the job that you do. And of course, on the HR part, right, we do also have to constantly on the HR part, we do job redesign, right? We redesign the roles, we get people upskill and we redesign, and they can actually see themselves growing with the organization. Take the kiosk, for example. You don't see our folks standing behind the counter and say, sir, would you like to upsize, right? You sell them. Now, what do you see our crew? They are in front of the counter, engaging our customers and providing hospitality services to our folks. So that's the redesign and the upskilling work that we've done.
Fantastic. So the one who happy feels makes happy meals. Kind of.
Yes, we always believe a happy employee equal a happy customer.
It's true. David, last question to you, and then we really need to wrap up. How do you deal with the fact that in hospitality, it's hard to get enough nurses? We read that, for example, in the news every day. So foreign talent has been a part of the healthcare system. At the same time, we have a lot of established people, experienced people in Singapore. How do you, at such a large organization that needs people to save lives, balance upskilling, foreign talent, getting people back into the workforce? How do you balance this from a people development perspective?
I think the organization needs to be a mixologist, right? In order for you to actually be able to do multiple things at the same time. And I think stemming from the last question, I think most important is COVID has forced us to rethink about the value of life. And as much as we are, wanting to build retention strategies, I think the whole focus of an individual has shifted. And I think organization structures will have to shift to support that as well. Older workers will have a space in workplace because they bring a lot of experience. Yes, they may not be as savvy, but they bring a wealth of experience that could be very, very useful. And I think we need a blend of everything to make everything work. It will be a new norm. There will be a lot of innovative ideas. We need to do a lot of disruptions. We need to take a lot of risks. But I think in time to come, we will have better, more stable and stronger processes and systems for us to tell even greater stories in time to come.
Fantastic. Thanks, David. I'll wrap up with a few kind of quotes that you said, some of the things you said. David, you said in HR, you need to give the diversity of learning that enable learners to pick any learning content they believe in. So it's going a little bit away from there's only one path with module 1, 2, 3, right? You'd call it the Netflix model. Chitek, you said workplace learning is crucial for SMEs. There are two main challenges for SMEs. One, they are afraid of losing talent, and we talked about all of us about it. And the second one is they can have difficulties upskilling their employees. So the trick is to make it a business problem, not an HR topic. That's what you said, right? Right. And then Lynn, I think the one is, of course, that you said classroom learning is taking a backseat. And you described one of the key challenges is not so much the hardware with an HARD to bringing devices in front of people, but touching their hearts, the hardware, and changing the mindset. And also how McDonald's is making sure it's very transparent, that everybody can learn and progress in the organization. Yeah, thank you very much. Fabienne, what are your key takeaways? What was your key learning today?
Yes, Lars, thanks a lot for asking. My key takeaway, and I think it's really the main topic here, what we heard is how to implement people skills development strategy is very diverse. There's no one fits all. There's a lot of different angles, a lot of different things to tackle, and it has to be combined and there are the interfaces. There's no learning and development without having the management buy-in, without having touched the hearts of the employees, without considering what is really the needs and the demands of the people. So there's not just one person sitting alone in the office and thinking about L&D and then having the intention to roll it out. So for me, there were so many different perspectives and challenges from different industries today, but the message is the same. It is a big task, multifaceted, and we have to work together, combine forces in the business to actually reach it.
Fantastic. I think that was a wonderful summary, and I hope our panelists didn't feel it was work on coming together, but it was a great exchange of thoughts, ideas, experiences. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that Lynn, Chitek, David, and of course Fabienne and the Swiss Gem team to make this happen today. A big shout out, of course, also to Skills Future SG as the partner of the Skills and People Development Awards. Next in the webinar series is the 9th of December when the awards will be given out. So everybody who submitted, you have to sit at the edge of your chair a few more days, a few more weeks, 9th of December, together with the DX Awards. That's when you know that your work will be rewarded. Thank you very much, everybody. I learned, I'm a person, so that's people and development one way or the other. Thank you very much and have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. Great job. Great job.
Thanks
Thank you
for having us here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stay safe.